My mother passed away years ago. I had to go to her funeral with my husband Diego and my children, as it had been a long time since we had been in contact. We didn't get along very well. She had a strong temper and was very strict and offensive with her words. In recent times, she began to get involved with strange people, linked to dark rituals, which made coexistence even more tense. I decided to move away to protect my family from this negative energy. When my mother passed away, my sister told me the news. I went to the funeral home to fill out the papers and saw my mother in the coffin. Alone at the reception, I clearly heard her voice calling me. I followed her voice until I found her in a dark room. She was lying on a stretcher. When I turned to leave, she was sitting, looking at me. I ran out and passed out, waking up in the hospital. After this episode, during the wake, my daughter was talking to herself near her grandmother's coffin, saying that her grandmother didn't want her to leave. I was furious and took her out of there. The candles around the coffin went out, and so did the light, leaving everything dark. Desperate, I screamed for help when I felt something touch my shoulder. It was my mother, saying she would come back for my daughter. I passed out again and woke up in the hospital. My husband and sister found me passed out. I asked about my daughter and discovered that she was missing from the funeral home. We found my daughter crying in a dark room, where my mother was standing behind me. We ran from there and left the place. I received a call saying that my mother's body had appeared charred in the coffin. The funeral was cancelled pending investigation. We started therapy for my daughter and me, and we attend church regularly for protection. I still feel scared about what happened at the funeral home, but I'm determined to protect my family. I pray every night that my mother finds peace and that no harm comes again. We will never go back there again.
Chapter 2. I worked at the reception of a funeral home. It wasn't my dream job, but as a university student needing to pay for my studies, I took it. My tasks involved assisting people with coffin prices, monitoring the number of guests during funerals, and general customer service. One day, during a quiet funeral, a man in an elegant suit entered looking disoriented. I offered help, informing him he was at Crossville Funeral Home. He seemed confused and left. Later, I noticed him alone in a closed room, which struck me as odd since it wasn't in use. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Knocking, I urged him to leave, but he remained fixated on the coffins. I informed the security guard, who insisted no one should be inside. We found no trace of the man. Confused, I returned to my post. Before leaving, I checked the room again and found a photo of the same man next to a coffin. Overwhelmed, I confided in a colleague, who shared similar experiences and reassured me that such encounters were common. Though tempted to quit, I needed the job to support my studies. I continued working there for 3 more months, encountering strange occurrences and shadows in the empty funeral home. Eventually, I found a better job and left. If you've experienced similar encounters, know you're not alone, especially if you're sensitive to such phenomena. Chapter 3. My name is Jorge, and I work in a funeral home as a thanatopractor. Despite being psychologically prepared and having years of experience, it's still difficult because many of the bodies that arrive have tragic stories. Sometimes, we have to leave them as aesthetically pleasing as possible by sewing limbs or repairing disfigured faces. I usually work alone, but a month ago, a medical student arrived as an intern and became my assistant, making my work a little easier. One night, while we were embalming the body of an elderly man who had died of a heart attack, another body arrived from the morgue. It was a motorcyclist who had died after being run over by a car and was in very bad condition. We knew it would take us all night with him. As we were finishing with the elderly man, we heard footsteps upstairs, which seemed strange as the funeral home was empty that night. The only body upstairs was that of the motorcyclist. I wasn't too concerned, but my assistant got nervous. I reassured him and told him to stay calm. However, the footsteps continued, now coming down the stairs. Thinking someone had entered, I went to check, but found no one upstairs. However, I noticed a stuffed bear lying on the floor, which hadn't been there before. I assumed it belonged to a child who had attended a funeral the day before. I took the bear to give it to the receptionist the next day. After finishing with the elderly man, we started working on the motorcyclist's body. While I was checking my cell phone, I heard a murmur that gave me goosebumps. It sounded like someone whispering in my ear. When I turned around, there was no one there. But I noticed the motorcyclist's head turned in the direction of the plush bear. I shouted to my assistant, and we both saw that the body's eyes were open, which was impossible as he had been deceased for over 24 hours. We couldn't understand how his head had turned or his eyes had opened, but I was certain he had whispered to me. Just as my shift ended, the owner of the funeral home approached me in the parking lot, asking about a stuffed bear. The wife of the deceased had mentioned it was in his backpack, but it was missing. She knew her husband had bought it for their daughter, who was about to graduate from preschool. Everything clicked for me. I couldn't hold back my tears as I led the owner to where I found the bear and explained everything. She was amazed but grateful. It turned out, I was friends with the security guard, so I asked to see the recordings from the night before just to make sure no one had come in to leave that bear or something. I just wanted to find a logical explanation. But when watching the videos after we put the biker in the upstairs room, it was possible to see a black shadow leaving that room and going down the stairs, disappearing on the first floor. There was no doubt, those steps we heard, that voice that whispered to me, that shadow that appeared in the videos, everything was related to the motorcyclist. It was his lost soul who just wanted to deliver the bear for his daughter. This story left a deep impression on me, and even as the years go by, I will always remember it.